Hello, fellow travelers. Welcome back to Respawn Station. My name is Kandula, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Nick Sivak, to talk about Ubisoft and why everyone seems to hate them. But of course, we won't get into that just yet. That's the main topic, and we have a few things to talk about before that. First of all, Nick and I just finished recording a bonus episode of the podcast that is only available on streaming services, so you have to go there to hear what we had to say about Fallout, because yes, we had more to say about Fallout. And also, thank you to everybody who listened to that Fallout episode. It is actually our most popular episode so far that we've done, and that's pretty awesome considering, like, you know, this is episode 7, and every episode, you know, kind of the growth, always welcome. So thank you to everybody who listened, and thank you to all the new followers on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you are listening on there, take a second, pause, you know, don't even pause the show, just let it play. Take a second, you know, fucking pull over your car, stop the bike, and give the show a rating, because it helps out a lot. And at the end of the week, by the way, if you didn't know, we're giving away a copy of Fallout 76 and Fallout 3 over on our Twitter, so check that out as well. But with that said, Nick, it's time for you to ask me that very, very important question. Will you do the honors?
3. What have you been playing?
Ah, beautiful. There's quite a few games we have to talk about, and the first one, I'm going to start it very easy and very light. Botany Manor. This was the game that last episode I said I was going to talk about, and then I last second moved it out of the way because at that time I had only played about an hour or 2 hours of the game, and now I've finished. I've rolled credits, and man, my full review is up on RespawnStation.com. You can check it out there. It's also in the description on YouTube, but my general thoughts, right, is it's a short game. It's about 5 hours, maybe 6 hours if you get lost or, you know, you want to stop and smell the roses. And it's...
Nice flower pun there.
Thank you. And it's a very, pleasant experience. You know, the whole game has this really strong art style that just kind of defines the experience throughout. Like the entire thing, you clearly understand what's going to happen around every corner, how everything's going to look. It has this uniformity to it, but at the same time, you know, as you're playing through the game, and by the way, it's called Botany Manor, and you literally are just kind of in that manor and those grounds the entire time you're playing the game. Like that is the only place you go in the game, but it's so well realized that you don't really, like, it doesn't really matter. Like it kind of brings that whole place to life in that way. And a few things that that for me really kind of stuck out from the experience. I think that it's first of all, the musical cues, like, you know, every time you enter a new area or have like a new chapter starts out, it's like this very pleasant experience, and you know, the whole vibe is pretty chill. Other than the fact that obviously it's a puzzle game, and so you have to put together puzzles. Now, the general concept of the game, for anyone who hasn't heard of Botany Manor, is you are exploring this manor as a retired botanist named Arabella Green. That's what it is. And she's essentially putting together this botanical research book called The Forgotten Flora. And so every chapter of the game is literally a chapter of the book that she is putting together. And it's, you know, the thing that I didn't expect to hit home quite as hard as it did is actually about how it kind of showcases the struggles of a 1890s or I guess 1800s like woman in science, because, you know, you'll kind of explore the castle the manor, and you'll see letters from like universities that she's applied to, where they're like, hey, sorry, but botany is like a serious field, like we can't just let anyone join, but like maybe you could like read a book and like teach your kids about it someday, you know, like it's like that. Or like family members will like leave will write to her and be like, hey, you need to like fucking get married and like not just like look at plants all day. And just the fact that like I was reading these things and I was like, oh, these fucking assholes, it triggered, like, it kind of made me understand her frustrations in a very kind of simple but effective way. And I think the narrative structure of having like encountering those those letters, and then also while you're in real time, compiling a book for her research, is kind of like a satisfying loop. Kind of the whole kind of the structure of the game.
Would you say,
Go
real
ahead.
quick, Sri, would you say that narratively, it tells like a gripping sort of story? Because I feel like in specifically puzzle games, it's a bit of a, scattershot approach. Sometimes they really nail like narrative parts interweaved with puzzles and such, and sometimes it's really kind of a backseat to the gameplay.
This is totally a backseat to the gameplay. In fact, I
Gotcha.
could totally understand someone who plays this game and then they're like, "Wow, the story fucking was just not good," and I could totally understand that because it is very like there's really no story. I mean, like there's this is not really a spoiler, but like the book finishing the book finishes the game. There's one maybe 5-minute sequence at the end that kind of puts a bow on it, but like there's not like traditional cutscenes that kind of deliver story, and like none of that is there, and to the point where if you are someone who is not reading what you're picking up, because as I picked up everything, I take the time to like go through everything and be like, oh, okay, I get the idea of what this is, or if I need to, like if there's like a date or something that I like that seems pretty important, I'll write it in my little notebook here that I have with me, and like that. And also one kind of maybe for some people negative that might be for the game is that you don't pick up any items that you like look at in the game. So if you find something in the orchard or orchid, is it orchard or what if you find something in the garden, let's say, and you have to refer to it again like 20 minutes later, you have to go back to the garden and pick up that item and look at it and then put it down. So I definitely recommend having just like a piece of paper where you're kind of doodling stuff down just to have and keep track of. And there's certainly I'm not gonna show you guys my notebooks because well they're pretty messy, but like I have like Morse code, like, oh, I think this is the Morse code thing, or like the doors have to be open like this. So that's quite fun. But to reiterate and answer your question, no, there's really not a story here. And if you're someone who doesn't read everything that is thrown at you, you will probably not even kind of process even the things I was talking about, like how the struggles she went through to become a bot, to get to where she is now. You probably wouldn't even kind of experience that for yourself. But with that said, the overall, I think that the game is just really pleasant, short, well put together. It has, by the way, I know a lot of people like to throw around the term walking simulator, and this game has really like satisfying kind of running mechanics. Like the acceleration of when you run is like really smooth, and when you stop it kind of decelerates very satisfyingly as well. I know that sounds weird to say, like to say that running is satisfying, but like first of all, it totally improves the pacing of the game because you're not as frustrated that like you have to go pick up everything all over the place, but also it just kind of like for me as someone who kind of plays very cinematically, I guess I like to move very kind of slowly and methodically, but like it's like pretty much I play games as if I'm like playing on the E3 stage, demoing the game for the first time, and it's kind of nice and satisfying to kind of move through the greenery or look through the manor and have these just really nice looking areas that you can kind of explore. And there's certainly a lot of screenshot worthy moments. The only technically the only kind of issues that I came across was like there's these hanging vines that you'll see on the manor or around the manor occasionally, and they have like this weird, they pop in a lot, like where if you're at a certain distance, like you can literally step up and you'll see kind of flicker into existence, and if you step back it's gone, that kind of thing. But other than that, man, I played this game on Xbox and it runs really smooth, didn't really have any problems with it, no crashes or anything. And honestly, if you have Xbox Game Pass, it is also on there. So just give it a go if you're looking for a nice chill, like, Saturday, Sunday game to unwind with. But Nick,
Right on.
next up, I'm gonna, actually, there's two games that we have to talk about that are big, or not big, but are topical. But I'm curious about this because I didn't know you'd played this. So, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. What's that like?
Yeah. So
First of all,
I
is this because the Borderlands movie's coming out? Is that why you're playing it?
no,
Okay.
it is not because of the Borderlands movie. I was just kind of looking at games in my backlog that I was trying to decide what I wanted to play next, basically,
Sure.
and I had seen Wonderlands because I had gotten it on sale for like $10 brand new a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and it was like one of the only like PS5 physical games that I haven't played and finished yet. That and Star Wars Jedi Survivor were the two that I was, going between.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what, I could kind of go for, some Borderlands kind of action. And what really stood out to me about Wonderlands originally was that it was like a fantasy set shooter, which I feel like there are examples of, but it's definitely not a genre that we get a whole lot of, or like a side genre that we get a whole lot of games out of.
Right.
And I just kind of, as I've mentioned multiple times on here, I love shooters and I really do like that kind of. Oh, what was that?
Sorry, I just realized there's things going on in chat, and you had replied, and I didn't even process it. But go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, it's all good. Uh, but yeah, so I wanted to give Wonderlands a try, and I'm still really early on. Like I've maybe only played like 4 hours, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I played Borderlands 3 like a year or two ago, and
Okay.
I'm a big
Are you
Borderlands.
well, are you a Borderlands, like, would you say you're a fan of Borderlands? Like, I mean, obviously, like, Austin is pretty much like you are to Fallout what Austin is to Borderlands. Like, that is, his bread and butter. Where does that stand for you?
Yeah, I would say I'm a fan. I'm not like a diehard fan,
Sure.
but I have played all of them except for the newest Tales from the Borderlands.
Okay.
Um, so like I played 1, 2, pre-sequel 3, and now I'm playing Wonderlands and the original Tales from the Borderlands. Uh, I'm a really big Borderlands 2 fan. I've played that like probably the most out of any of them. And like I was gonna say, like Borderlands 3, I had fun with it, but it kind of didn't really, excite me in the ways that I was hoping.
Sure.
Um, Wonderlands is scratching. Maybe I'm just in the mood for this type of game right now because it is kind of scratching that itch, and it does feel different than Borderlands 3. I think the fantasy setting is doing a lot to like
Right.
kind of elevate that. Like I really do like
Did,
the
did you play
magic spells.
did you play that standalone DLC that was like, is it Dragon's Keep or something?
Yeah, so it was originally a DLC for Borderlands 2 that they re-released eventually as standalone. I
Yeah.
played it back when I played Borderlands 2, but I didn't play it when they re-released it.
Oh, yeah, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon's Keep. That's what it is.
And I remember that being one of the better DLCs for Borderlands 2. So whenever they first announced this a couple years ago, I was like, that'll probably be fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it. Like I said,
How far are you into
they
it?
do
Sorry, I don't know if you
about
said
like
that already.
4 hours or so.
And how long is it total? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, but I
Sure.
think it's somewhere in the like 25 to 30 hour range. Like
Okay.
it's not like super long, but long
Sure.
enough to sink your
But
teeth
yeah,
into.
yeah, sure, yeah.
But yeah, they do some interesting stuff. There's like a little overworld that has like, little traversal things like opening up shortcuts, and they have these cool random encounter things where like you'll run into an enemy in the overworld and it'll like load you into an arena that you do some battle in and get some loot. So there's some interesting stuff that they're doing so far, and the characters are pretty humorous. I know Borderlands humor can kind of be hit and miss for people.
Right.
I feel like 3 I probably wasn't vibing too well with, but so far I've laughed a couple times at the stuff in here, so I think I'm gonna
Do you
like
want
it
me to tell you? I
overall.
did look it up, how long it is. Do you want me to tell you, or do you want the suspense?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
It's 16 hours apparently, the campaign for that game. See, I was actually in theaters watching. What was I watching? Oh my god, it's gonna eat me alive. Oh, Boy Kills World. It was an early screening of Boy Kills World, and they played the Borderlands trailer, and it was actually the first time I'd seen the trailer for Borderlands, and man, I look, I have. Oh, I think I accidentally muted myself for someone. I'm not sure who I muted myself for. But anyway, everything's still good. I am not a Borderlands fan, so for me, it would really have to be something like Fallout in terms of like a show that's or an adaptation that's so good that you're like, oh, everyone's talking about it. It's the buzz. I'll go watch it. I'll see what it's all about. But I will not like I like this didn't give me the hopes that would be the case. And again, it's the same thing that I'll always say. It applies for every game and every movie that we talk about. Even if I look at something and I'm not initially like, oh man, like that doesn't look that good. I always still hope that it turns out awesome because one, we the audience can enjoy it, but also two, it's just more satisfying. It's if it's something that's good and everyone can have a good time with it. So. Yeah, no. I actually, speaking of backlog, you said this game was on your backlog. I have a backlog of playing through all of the Borderlands games. Did I ever tell you, Nick, is how I got my first copy of Borderlands?
I don't recall, so I don't know if you have.
I remember back when I was in, I don't remember, maybe middle school or something like that. But I was walking. Oh wow, this is a crazy. It's all coming to place. The Respawn Station cinematic universe, podcast universe is coming together. So last episode I talked about how like one of my friends got me into Fallout New Vegas for the first time, and like that whole experience. That same friend, I was walking with him to go play some basketball, and this random man in a I think it's a UPS outfit. It could be FedEx. It was I think it was UPS. It was a UPS outfit, comes up to me, or both of us, and says, hey, you guys have a PlayStation 3? And we're like, yeah, we do. And he's like, all right, cool. And then he just hands us 2 games. Now, those games, Nick, actually, I have them both. I have to, hold on. Fill the air, Nick. Tell me about your day.
It was a pretty nice day. Like I said, I spent most of it playing or watching some Fallout, and
the first game was Borderlands. For all the video viewers, for the audio listeners, I'm holding up a copy of Borderlands for the PS3. The second game was Resident Evil 5 Gold Edition. Now, here's the thing: the great thing about this, right? My friend, like I said, he always picked up the latest and greatest games. So he already had a copy of Resident Evil 5. So I ended up getting both games. And also, Resident Evil 5 ended up being the first game that I ever played all the way through co-op. And I'll never fucking forgive the game because we played it on like the hard difficulty and it didn't give me the trophy for the end. And I'm still pissed to this day about it.
Brutal.
But nevertheless, no. I really want to play through all the Borderlands games. I feel like I'd probably have fun with them. The only one I've actually played is the kind of the spin-off. It's Tales from the Borderlands, the first one, the original from actual Telltale. And I loved the fuck out of that one. So I haven't played the new one or anything like that, but I'm hoping that that humor and everything translates to the main game series.
Yeah, like Don is saying in chat, the new one kind of got some bad reviews, so that's kind of what's turned me off from giving the new one a try, because I really did love that original Tales from the Borderlands also.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like shooters 3, which I'm pretty sure you do, like you'll find some stuff to like in Borderlands.
Well, talking about shooters, Nick, obviously we're only on the 7th episode, but this is in the 3.5 years that I've written for Respawn Station. This is a truly unique situation that we find ourselves in, because both of us are going to talk about 2 different games that share a publisher and a developer, which is kind of fucking crazy to think about. But Nick, tell me a little bit about this new game that just came out. Or actually, hold on. I'll look up when like the exact date, because I know the embargo lifted, but I want to see, when did this come out. It came out April 23rd. Yesterday. It came out yesterday. Nick, talk to me about Phantom Fury from developer Slipgate Ironworks and publisher 3D Realms.
Yeah, sure. So Phantom Fury is a new entry in another, genre that's very popular in the indie space right now, which are retro style first person shooters.
Yep.
This is a sequel to a game that came out a couple years ago called Ion Fury, which I actually played last year, I think, or
Mm-hmm.
the year before. I forget exactly when I played it.
And it's
Time blurs
also
together.
like a a spin-off, or sorry, another like a so okay, yeah, as you said, there is the original game, Ion Fury, which is from a different developer, but then there's also another game called Bombshell, which stars specifically Bombshell. I forget her last name, but oh, sorry, it's
Mhm.
Shelley Bombshell Harrison. So this is that continuation of her story, I guess.
Yeah. Um, I haven't actually played Bombshell,
No,
but
that's
I
fine. Yeah.
do. I knew that they were like, related in
Right,
that
right, right.
way. Um, Ion Fury was kind of interesting because it was a modern game released that was developed on the Build engine, which was made famous by Duke Nukem 3D.
Yep.
So it was a brand new game, but it really did feel like a retro game that you could have been playing in the 90s, like everything down to the animations and the visuals and
Right.
all of that.
Yeah.
Phantom Fury, on the other hand, is going for a bit of a different vibe. It's 3D this time because Build Engine, like it was 3D, but it uses 2D pixel
Right.
art and
Yeah.
sprites to create a lot of different effects.
Hmm.
This game is in like actual 3D, and if Ion Fury was to be related to like Duke Nukem 3D,
Right.
Phantom Fury feels like it's related to the original Half-Life. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
the games are very different. Like Ion Fury is it's very fast paced. There's a lot of enemies on the screen, a lot of action happening. Phantom Fury is not as many enemies on the screen, but they're a bit more dynamic in how you interact with them. There's a bit more animations going on with them. There's like, different almost factions that are fighting amongst each other
Yeah.
in the battlefield. So it's definitely a different vibe. And rather than just running around shooting enemies and, you know, looking for the key card, there is still a little bit of that in Phantom Fury.
Yeah.
But there's more like physics puzzles and like exploring these environments that you're playing compared to something like Ion Fury, which is very much,
Right.
clear out the room, find the card.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
it's a game that, so I'll preface and say I've only played, I think, 4 or 5 missions of Phantom Fury.
Uh
So
huh.
like I'm still like pretty early on in the game, but
Sure.
I probably played like 3 or 4 hours of it.
Yeah.
And it's fun so far. It definitely is, kind of wearing that Half-Life inspiration on its sleeve. A lot
Very
of the
much.
environments look very Half-Life. Like I said, the
Yeah.
gameplay feels, definitely going for that style. And it has some rough edges also. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not bad by any means, I would say, at least at this point.
Yeah.
But there are like I've been like getting lost in some of the levels where I'm not exactly, clear on where I should be going, or like specifically in this last level that I played, there's these gates that you have to open up with a these red valves. And I was straight up just lost. I was like, man, I don't know where to go. I need one of these red valves, but I can't find it anywhere. Turns out I had it in my inventory.
Dang.
I don't know when I picked it up, and there was no real like icon or like visual indicator to suggest that I had something in my inventory.
Right.
So I was just kind of like fumbling around until eventually I just happened to hit the E button on the valve, and I was like, oh man, I had it in my inventory this whole time. But
uh. Go ahead,
Yeah,
go ahead.
just like a little unclear in some areas, and there's some, if there's a lot of physics based, puzzle solving and gameplay stuff, there's bound to be some wonkiness there, and I have been like, launched up in the air by, a barrel, vibrating weirdly, or
Yeah,
like there was one moment where I got stuck out of bounds and had to reload a save. So like there's some jank there, but like so far, I'm still having a fun enough time. There's not
yeah.
really a whole lot of games that specifically go out of their way to emulate that Half-Life style, probably because Half-Life kind of nailed it like right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's fun so far. It has its rough edges. Like I'm gonna be playing it more, but yeah, it's I'm still maybe a little bit too early to give like fully,
So
definitive stamp of approval
I mean,
on.
you've definitely played it more than me. I've played it probably 2 hours or so, and my initial thoughts are pretty much they echo yours um, pretty closely. So like the one thing that I like, I liked the to start with what I liked, right? So I liked the kind of the general '90s aesthetic of all of it. Like the main character, Bombshell Harrison is like very like she delivers quips and one liners. I actually think, and I could be maybe I misconstrued it, but I think there's actually a setting in the settings or option in the settings that actually lets you toggle on or off how often she does the quips, because I think it's like for like every two
There
minutes or
is,
something.
yeah. There's one in the options for that.
But I like I mean, even some of like the quips have some references to like other kind of notable IPs and stuff like that, very quotable stuff. In that any kind of nerd video gamer would probably understand. And there are some, like you were saying, that it is kind of that blend of the Half Life um, physics of it all, and some of it is cool because I think part of that nature is like picking up objects and you can throw them or interacting with certain things. I think like the interacting with arcade items is like you can interact with and play the arcade games, which is pretty fucking cool because some of them. I mean, they're definitely like made to be the just a little add on in the game, but it's a nice touch to be able to play the arcade games. But that
Hmm.
being said, I don't think, again, in my 2 hours with the game, I don't think that the it justifies itself as being a Half-Life esque game, or like have like it doesn't justify the move to having all these physics based gameplay mechanics or anything. Because there's not anything that I'm like, oh yeah, this has to like. I don't see anything in this that doesn't make me go, oh, this could not have been on the old engine, or like in a similar fashion to to Ion Fury. I haven't played Ion
Hmm.
Fury. I only went back and watched it, but like I've played boomer shooters that are like that, so I kind of know the general idea of like what it's like to be playing in that engine. And for anyone who
Hmm.
does have any interest, by the way, the Ion Fury came out in 2019. It was developed by Void Point, and then Bombshell was actually came out in 2016, and that was developed by Slipgate Ironworks, who obviously worked on this one as well. And so far, though, I do I'm enjoying the kind of general experience. I think there's like some fun to be had. And I just gave a thumbs up for some reason, so I'm glad my the camera understands. And I found like some of the dialogue to be charming. There is also some nice. Actually, Nick, you probably could attest to this, or maybe shut it down. But I thought there was some good gameplay variety in terms of like you're at least doing different things that aren't just like obviously majority of the time you're shooting, but there's like some car mechanics, like you drive around a car at one point, and there's things that kind of change up what you're doing, to not just shooting all the time. um
Hmm. Yeah, they do enough to, kind of cycle between like you're in like an exploration mode, you're in a combat mode, you're in a puzzle solving kind of mode. So they do enough, at least in, the early gameplay that I've experienced, where, it's not like a drag or anything like that. I know one thing that Ion Fury did that I wasn't a big fan of was some of the later arenas just like really threw like the kitchen sink at you with enemies, and it became kind of like you know, a real test of grit to get through some of those fights. And like I don't imagine that that's going to be the case with this game here. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the just like the general gameplay is kind of echoing what you were saying, where it wasn't exactly like, at least to this point, there's not really, like you said, a justification for the real Switch outside of different
The novelty.
developers, like you
Yeah,
said,
sure. Yeah, sure.
and the novelty of it. But yeah, I would agree that I'm kind of waiting to see if they do something, interesting with the physics space stuff, or if it is just kind of gonna feel like a similar retread to, stuff that you've already done in Half-Life or Half-Life 2.
Right. Yeah. But there is still some kind of rough edges, though. I will say the things that I personally came across that I thought kind of stuck out to me was like you'll kind of occasionally see enemies like spawn right in front of you. Like they'll just spawn in front of you, and then they'll start engaging combat, which I always feel like kind of breaks that immersion a little bit. I just put them in a dark room and then have them open the doors and rush out like like every other kind of game like this kind of does, or just crawl out of the ground. I guess we'll get to that in a second. There's also a moment I had where like there's a minigun and like it totally bugged out for me. I had to restart the game to kind of play it again. So there's some kind of like I said, rough edges, but for the most part, I'm still having a good time with it, and I think there's enough there. And also, as someone who hasn't played Ion Fury, I still, you can play this game without feeling like you're missing out on much. Like it's certainly, it has a feel of like, oh shit, something's happened. We're picking up the story, but also like I could have easily see this as a standalone title as well. And then they just don't, that's just like how the narrative starts. It kind of, sorry, I went to film school, so I can say this. It starts with the inciting incident, so you don't have much of a waiting time.
Yeah, so similar to what you said about Botany Manor, story in these games kind of takes a backseat. So yeah, don't feel like you need to go back and play Ion Fury to enjoy this one.
Yeah, definitely. And then that brings us to the other game by actually I will say, so it is a 3D Realms game, but it is developed in tandem by Kill Pixel Games and Slipgate Ironworks. So while Slipgate is involved with this one as well, they're not kind of the sole kind of developer on it. But that game that I'm talking about is Wrath, Aeon of Ruin. Now, this game is out today on consoles. But for the last week, they sent us a review code, and so for the last week, I've been playing the game. And so I actually played, like I said, I played 2 hours of Phantom Fury, and then we got the code for this one, and so I was like, oh, I'll switch on to this, and it was kind of a cool kind of thing to see that, oh yeah, it's the same, shares a developer and publisher, etc. But I feel so strongly differently about this game, and so essentially the okay, I'll read you kind of the general description here, just because I don't want to maybe sell it the wrong way. So you are an outlander, once adrift upon the ageless sea, which is how literally the game starts. You now find yourself on the shores of a dying world. From the consuming darkness emerges a figure cloaked in white, the shepherd of wayward souls, who burdens you with the task of hunting down the remaining guardians of the old world. You must journey into the vast gloom to explore ancient ruins, discover forgotten secrets, and battle the horrors that lurk within. That's the gist. Now, here's the thing. As Nick had said, or as Nick had said that I had said, story is probably not a big thing in this game. Like, you should understand, like, that, like, what I just described to you is, like, the most kind of, like it is as story as it's gotten so far. And now, keep in mind, I'm probably 5 to 6 hours into this game, and so I've put quite a hefty time on it, and I've been playing on PlayStation as well, just for anyone who's wants to know what I've been playing on. But so first of all, the story, bare bones, and much like the cloaked figure that they're talking about. And then also, there's no real dialogue. Like the cloaked figure, he kind of talks like, he's like, and then they'll have like dialogue of like what he's saying or whatever. So like you kind of have to understand that level of like, that's kind of what's happening. You have to understand that, that's the kind of game it is, right? One thing that I find a little bit interesting about it is that you essentially go out into, like, there's this kind of opening tutorial mission area, and then you go out into this open map, and then the map has these portals that take you to different to actually like different levels, like that, like those are the levels of the game that you have to play to beat the game. And the interesting concept is that you can play those in any order you want, because you're open onto the map, and you can just be like, oh, I want to go here, and you just hop in and start shooting. Each of those levels probably takes about an hour or so to beat. And you also have essentially, I'm trying to explain the basics of the game first before I give all my opinions about it. So you also have an arsenal of weapons. You hold down R1 on R1 on PlayStation, and it lets you cycle through your weapons, and you hold down L1 to cycle through your items. And the weapons are pretty straightforward, but like there's some kind of interesting ones. Like there's this kind of an LMG, but you're shooting fangs from it. But other than that, like I haven't seen any kind of crazy, cool, interesting weapons that are like, whoa, this is really, fucking cool or awesome. You start out with like a pistol and a shotgun, at least like from my playthrough. That's how kind of the way I got those weapons. But the coolest one that I've discovered so far is actually the very first weapon that you get. It's called the Blade of Ruination. And essentially, it kind of it's a blade that you don't like hold it. It's just like almost like imagine like an Assassin's Creed gauntlet, but like you flip it out like around, so it's on the top of your arm, and it's just a giant blade instead of just a small little like hidden blade. And the cool thing with the Blade of Ruination is that, like, apart from just attacking enemies, it has much like some of the weapons as well. There's no aiming. I should specify. It's a boomer shooter. You don't aim in this. Aim down sights, I should say. So you just kind of hold down or right trigger to fire or attack, and then left trigger is like an alt essentially. And the alt for the Blades of Ruination is like essentially like a lunge, where you can kind of do like like a dash forward or whatever. So you can use it to not just obviously kill enemies, but you can go across like certain spaces if you kind of time the jumps right and everything. But with that,
I do like gameplay mechanics that tie into platforming with my shooters.
Yes, but with that said, you've now understood the basics, right, of what this game is. Now let me tell you about why I'm not a huge fan of it, because there's quite a bit. So first of all, I don't like to just be all negative. So I'll kind of flick back and forth. So starting with a positive, the combat items that I was talking about are actually pretty interesting, and they're actually kind of clutch when you need it. So there's these items that you pick up throughout the game that you are a byproduct of exploration. Like very few of them are kind of just handed to you like, oh, you're walking down the path and it's just in the middle of the path. Like it's stuff you have to dive into water to find, or go through these kind of hidden crevices or whatever in order to find these items. And these items essentially, like one of them, you pop it and it gives you like you drink it essentially, and it gives you the ability to steal some of your enemy's life as you kill them. So like however much damage you're doing to them, you gain that life back, which is nice, especially when your health is really low. There's another one where you throw it on the ground or wherever you're aiming, you throw it, and it releases this purple gas, and any enemy that walks into that purple gas then starts attacking the other enemies, so they kind of just turn on each other. So stuff like that is a nice kind of mix to add a little bit of chaos or strategy to the game, depending on what kind of player you are. But this game is fucking relentless. I talked about these levels being like an hour long, and it is just like room after room after room of just enemies spawning and just going for your asshole. Like it is so often that you're just surrounded by enemies and you're just trying to, like, for the love of God, trying to like manage, like, keep all of them in front of you and fires, or before, something, smacks you in the back and kills you. Speaking of smacking you in the back and killing you, how do you die? Well, obviously the health goes to 0, and you can pick up health by essentially they're vials on the ground. They're just laying on the ground, that are like, small vials that are like 10 health, or big vials that are like, I think like 50 health or something like that. And there's also armor parts that you can pick up. It's a boomer shooter, guys. You've played it before. You've played one. You've kind of understand the mechanics of most of them. The one thing that this game does differently is something called a soul tether. Now, I haven't played, like, my boomer shooter experience is pretty much in the last like 3 years, and I haven't played a game that has this mechanic in it. Nick, you probably have a little bit more experience than me, but, listeners, I'm sure there's some boomer shooter experts out there, so feel free to kind of give me your input, if there's another game that has it. But a soul tether is essentially a manual save spot. So you pick up soul tethers as you're playing, right? And they look like skulls, essentially. So you as you're exploring, again, you kind of, these are much more on the beaten path. You don't have to explore as much for these, but you pick up these soul tethers, and then they go into your inventory, and then whenever you want, you press up on the D-pad, and it puts down the soul tether, and that is a checkpoint. That is a save point that you have that you can go back to. And you go back to it not just by dying, but if you click the down on the D-pad, it immediately lets you either fast travel to the last soul tether you did, or fast travel to a shrine where you last got healed, or I think like restart the level if you're like a masochist or something. But the soul tethers are fucking brutal. I mean, what a absolutely crazy mechanic for a game that does not fucking stop. Also, I'm playing this game on medium difficulty because I was like, easy's too easy. You can't play on I gotta have at least a little challenge. Lo and behold, you can't change the difficulty, at least as far as I understand. I'm stuck with medium. And I'm so thankful. I am so thankful that in the settings there's an option to have infinite soul tethers, so you don't have to only pick them up, because otherwise only the ones you pick up can be used. So if you pick 2 up, you have 2 save points, and once you use them, you have to wait till you find another one, or you're just shit out of luck.
They like break after you use them?
Yeah,
after
yeah.
You respawn?
Yes.
Ooh.
So like, it's a fucking, it is just a test of the will to get through some of the parts of this game.
Because I was gonna say, like, that's an interesting idea. If it's like save points, like you can put down your own save point or whatever, and like have it as like a checkpoint, so like you kind of have some agency on where you put that in a level. But
yes.
Yeah, if you're saying that these are like hour-long levels and there's not many of them, that sounds pretty brutal.
Yeah. And you can, there are like a few shrines, and the shrines, essentially, they're not like, Dark Souls shrines, as I'm sure maybe some people might kind of go to. It's just for healing, and then you can also spawn back there if you don't have, if that's convenient for you. But, they're just for healing. It's not like, you do it and then, enemies respawn in the area or anything like that. Just to clarify for anyone who might be thinking that, but yeah, so it is. I shamelessly it turned on infinite soul tethers, and so I definitely save scum certain parts of this game to where like I'd clear out like a small section, go back to safety, soul tether, go back in, kill a few more, and it can be like really brutal when you have like when you're working with 16 health, right? You're coming back from your soul tether with 16 health and 0 ammo on like across all your weapons, and all you have is a fucking blade of ruination. And you're like, oh, what the fuck do I do now? It's a tough fucking situation to be in, and I think there is a certain to kind of the game's credit, or just kind of a credit to, or just games in general, I guess. Some people like those kind of hard games, and that challenge is appealing to them. Unfortunately, like I said, the game has these long levels, and they end up feeling tedious because there are a lot of the same enemies that you're seeing over and over again. It's not that much kind of like visually interesting, if you will. Like in like these enemies, some of the enemies are by the way, very inspired, I'll say, by things that you've probably seen in other boomer shooters, or probably the shooters that they're inspired by, the OG games that boomer shooters are kind of trying to emulate. None of them kind of really stood out as like, oh, this is a totally interesting new design that I liked. And so what ended up happening was like this is essentially like the cyclical cycle of me being like, I don't care for these enemies, and then they just keep fucking spawning, and then I die, and then I'm respawning, and I'm like, I gotta go kill more of these things until I eventually clear out the area. And there are so many random like flying enemies. And the problem with the flying enemies mainly is that they have terrible pathing. Usually when you're I'm trying not, like, I'm not a game dev, so I'm not gonna like get technical with it. But essentially, when you have an enemy, the enemy AI essentially is like, okay, it's just gonna stand there stagnantly, or spawn in when the player goes through a trigger spot. And then when the player is in their zone, like in view, they start attacking. And good enemy, I'll say like good enemy AI will essentially plot out how to get to you, right? Like, so it'll be like, okay, the player is in the other room. I have to go through this doorway, go through and find them. Really smart AI is like, oh, I know the player is in the other room. I can take cover and then shoot at him from the cover or flank him. That's advanced AI. That's what this game, flying enemies will just get stuck in doorways because they're trying to beeline it to you. Like, wherever you are, they don't try to path through the doorway. They're just like, I have to fly through this wall to get him. What's frustrating about this is obviously the fact that, like, the enemies are getting stuck. That's an obvious problem. But also, to kill some of them, you have to like kind of like bait them out. Like, you have to like go to the corner, and then like before they can attack you, like run back and then start shooting at them. And also, some of them can attack through the fucking walls. So like you're just like, okay, I think I'm safe, and then all of a sudden you're fucking taking damage. Because some dude's attacking you from across to a hallway. It's a little ridiculous. Some of that stuff. And there's also I'm not sure what exactly it's called. I think it's called a wench or a wrench. No, I think it's called a wench. But essentially, it's a monster that has like, it's open from like the mouth down to like the chest, and it's just all teeth. Fuck that enemy, man. Holy shit. They just spawn, like, they're just out of these corners, and then they just bum rush you, and you can't fucking anyway. I'm gonna move on from that. Let's see, what do I have anything else? No, I don't have anything else. It can be fun at times, and probably some people might kind of. Oh, actually, last thing that I have to mention that I did make a note of. The ammo and items don't always pick up immediately after you walk over them. So like, there'll be times. Again, it's not that like on paper any one of these things individually is bad, but like, let me put this whole picture together, right? It's a game that has long levels, soul tethers, enemies that are kind of repetitive that you kind of get used to after a while, that are frustrating because they have not often like great pathing, or do they just spawn out of nowhere and start trying to attack you. And on top of that, having to navigate through all of that while like trying to pick up ammo and not being able to shoot the enemies because your character's not picking up the ammo, like unless you walk specifically over the spot. It just makes for a really, really frustrating experience. Which is unfortunate, and I really I wish, and I could sing the game some more praises, and that's not to say you might not like it. If you're just someone who like, I just want to play some boomer shooter, I want to see what see what the game has in store, maybe you'll like it. But yeah, this one I'm gonna keep playing it just to see how far I can make it. But this one's unfortunately just didn't land for me.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it's kind of like a thousand cuts kind of situation where, like you said, nothing sounds like, super bad, but it's just like a lot of, tiny irksome things that, end up adding up to be a pretty big thing.
Right. And I don't think necessarily that they're like awful, right? But also like there's so many frustrations, and I think the biggest thing is like there's so many frustrations that I have to like caveat you with. to say, oh, you want to check out Wrath, Aeon of Ruins? Well, go for it. But like also remember like this and this and this. Like be warned. And it's hard for me to recommend that when there are, if anything, the boomer shooter genre is oversaturated at this point. Like it's there's so many games coming out that some of them don't need that caveat. And I would much rather just say, hey, play one of those games instead. You'll have an experience that is similar in terms of gameplay, but without the kind of the frustrations that come with it. And so yeah, ultimately, I think that kind of, yeah. I don't have much else to say about it. But with that said, Nick, I have to end every episode or every episode with at least a little bit of a tease toward what's coming next. And next episode,
hit me with it.
Actually, maybe not. I can't even talk. Maybe I can't even talk about a next episode. I think the embargo might be the day after the next episode, but stay tuned for the podcast because I got a preview code for a game that I'm pretty interested in. I've had my eyes on it for pretty much the start of the year, since the start of the year in January, and I'm not gonna say any more, but it's fun, and I'll talk about it later. Either next episode, or if the embargo is in fact the day after, then episode 9, I guess, is what it would be.
Absolutely.
But
that's a good tease. That's a good tease, Rick.
Thank you. And you know what? Here, I did a good tease, so I have to do a good plug as well, ladies and gentlemen. Right here in my hand, for the video listeners, for the audio listeners, I'm holding a steel water bottle. Or a metal water bottle. I don't know what I'm not good with this describing products apparently, but I'm holding a Coldest water bottle, and this is, if you don't know, Coldest. We've had a sponsorship with them for a very long time. They've been long-time fans, and you can get yourself a Coldest bottle, which is in fact, by the way, really fucking good. I've been using them for quite a few years, and not just like because they're sponsors, but like I've taken my Coldest bottle to India, where it is ridiculously hot, and the water stays the same temperature of when I put it in, which is a godsend. And you can go and get yourself a nice 10% off with using the code CHUMBAG at checkout. So go ahead, check it out. Coldest water, or Coldest, I guess they rebranded. They were Coldest water, but now they're just Coldest because they make pillows and dog beds and everything like that. So check them out. But with that said, again, another drinking game. Say have a shot every time I say "with that said." Even my reviews, I'll say like "with that said," and then I'm like, I have to take that out because I said "with that said" too many times. It's time.
Yeah, I don't know of many of mine, but I'm sure that there's things that I use every single time that I'm writing something.
If there was anyone that would be able to spot it, Nick, it would be me. And I will say, I'm blanking on it now. There is something that I always notice that you use, and it's funny because like you not only use it, but like you also like, it's like a word that like I think either needs to be hyphenated or spaced, and you always do the other one, and that's why it always sticks out to me. But anyway, I'll find the word some other time. But it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about what's on the news. And there's a short news day, but some kind of juicy ones. Nick, what's this metaphor refantasio?
Yep.
Do you know about this?
Yeah, so this is a new RPG from the team that, develops Persona, and I believe Shin Megami Tensei.
Okay.
It's, similar sort of kind of like art style, like it's a JRPG, so it has that kind of anime look, but this one has like this interesting kind of like fantasy mixed with like contemporary setting. I haven't had the opportunity to see much gameplay of it, but I know it's been in development for like a really long time. And the news about, Metaphor Refantasio is that it is set to launch on October 11th. So nice. It finally got a release date. Yeah, it's I'm a pretty new person to the Persona series, but it's
Right.
definitely been getting a lot more popular over here in the West.
Yeah, I think
And
because they're on Game Pass now, right? I think like that kind of
I
definitely lends
think it
itself
is.
to.
I haven't verified Metaphor specifically, but I
Or
think
sorry, the
it
Persona
is.
games. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about Metaphor,
Mhm.
but I think that like part of the reason why Persona games are getting that exposure is because like having Game Pass and kind of re-release. I think that kind of really drove the conversation for those games.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's a new like kind of hybrid action slash turn-based RPG, kind of like Persona and Shin Megami Tensei. And like I said, it just has that that interesting Atlas Persona team. I think it's Studio P. I think is the development like specific arm of that.
Right.
But yeah, the you know those games are extremely popular for a reason. This game looks to be really interesting, and it's a new IP, so I think it gets some brownie points for that. You know,
Yeah.
in a era and time where so many game companies are obsessed with the sequel and the remake,
Sure.
I'm always going to give a pat on the back to the new IPs that come out.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously with the when you get a release date, it means that pre-orders are already up. So if you have any interest in the game, feel free to do that. But obviously, we're not going to encourage it pre-orders because everyone hates pre-orders, and we can't say pre-orders are nice because then we'll get canceled, and we don't want that. A few other things. So, speaking of release dates, I think there's the Stellar Blade, right? Comes out tomorrow, April 26th. I think is when that release is. But the review embargo just lifted for that. Some really good reviews, pretty solid scores all around. So looking forward to that one. Though it is interesting, I did see. I believe. Oh shit! I just blanked. This isn't on the newscast. I just remembered like reading about how like someone was upset that Stellar Blade was greenlit in Japan or it was released in Japan, but one of their games wasn't. Do you know them?
I saw this
I can't think of
earlier
the game now.
today.
What game they were
It,
talking about?
I think it was EA. I think it was Dead Space Remake was
Oh,
the game
sure,
in
sure.
question.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, that was interesting. Different things are showing. One's gore and one's sex, but or not sex, sexualized things. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I guess funny what kind of passes for um,
Different ratings boards.
ratings. Yeah. Tales of Kenzara Zhao is also out to some nice reviews. It's a Metroidvania, kind of steeped in African mythology, it seems, or kind of lore. And it's from the studio of the voice actor of Bayek from Assassin's Creed, which is something I'm very excited to talk about soon. But yeah, that one's also reviewed really well, so definitely check that out. But the most, let's see what else is there. Oh, another release date: Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Nick, what's going on with this one?
Yeah, so this got revealed recently for the first time, and also, set with a window of 2024, so coming sometime this year. Um, this one I thought was just like, particular to highlight because, I was looking at, headlines over the last weeks, and I was like, oh yeah, that was kind of interesting. And Kingdom Come Deliverance, I think it was a game that kind of came out and like it has its fans, but I don't think it really set the world on fire for what it was trying.
Yeah.
It's this kind of medieval times kind of actiony RPG kind of game uh, that tries to steep itself in like realism. I remember was how that they were like trying to phrase it, and those kind of games always kind of set a flag off in my head where it's like, so does that mean that this is going to be like kind of slow, kind of like you know
Yeah.
very methodical, just like the kind of things that you would assume, say like a Need for Speed versus Gran Turismo. Like,
Right. Right.
there's just
Right.
certain things when the word realism gets injected that like, carry some baggage for the game. And I think like it did okay when it came out. Like I vaguely remember, middling to good reviews for it. So, maybe a sequel here is the opportunity to improve upon some of those,
and
shortcomings that the
kind of what
original
works.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that they've released anything else since the first game. So I feel like they've been chipping away at this for a good bit now.
By the way, before we get too far into it, Joey in chat said, I attribute Duke Nukem to you, Sri. Don't know why. Here's a fun fact. When I've never played to completion a Duke Nukem game, but I would like to believe that I forced myself into puberty by essentially trying to do the Duke Nukem voice so often. I remember as a kid I had like this crummy old iPod or something. It wasn't an iPod. It was like like one of those rip-off iPods or whatever, and I downloaded
SanDisk.
yeah, and I downloaded this soundboard. It was a Duke Nukem soundboard, and I would listen to it, and I'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm here to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of gum." Like I just say stupid like one-liners over and over again as Duke Nukem. And I think that's firmly
It's a pretty good impression, honestly.
That's just like fucking like instinct coming back to me, I guess, because like I haven't done that voice in a long time. It's just like it's just that's how long I've done it to get myself through puberty. And so anyone who's like, oh man, his podcast voice is great. That's Duke Nukem, baby. This is one of the most interesting ones, news topics for me, and that is that Embracer Group announces its intention to transform into 3 standalone, publicly listed entities at NASDAQ Stockholm. So this one, kind of very top level, right? Essentially, what they said was that Embracer Group is now splitting up into 3. There's the first one is called the Asmondi Group. The second one is Coffee Stain and Friends. And the third one of my favorites, Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends. So essentially, each of these has kind of different, it's actually more than kind of meets the eye. I say that, making that joke. I don't know if there's actually someone who owns Transformers in this, but that'd be perfect. It was. But essentially, so like Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends, right? It not just includes the IP for Middle-earth and everything. And by the way, all this stuff is on the Embracer Group website. So Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends is described as a creative powerhouse of AAA development and publishing for PC and consoles, as well as the stewards of the Lord of the Rings and Tomb Raider intellectual properties, among many others. Now that means that yes, along with the Lord of the Rings IP, they will also have the Dead Island IP, Kingdom Come Deliverance, Nick. That's also on here. Killing Floor, Metro, and Tomb Raider, among others. Now, that means that the companies that are under, the friends that were that is in the title, those friends are Crystal Dynamics, Dambuster Studios, Eidos Montreal, Flying Wild Hog Studios, Tripwire, Vertigo Games, Warhouse Studios. And obviously some kind of notable names in there that I'm sure kind of people will be able to pick out for probably different reasons. I mean, any one of those kind of come out to you, Austin? Or Austin, what the fuck, Nick? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean a couple. Crystal Dynamics, obviously.
Yes, that's what that's the one. Yeah.
Flying Wild Hog. I've played some of the Shadow Warrior games. They're mainly known for that.
Yeah.
And they actually did Devolver Land Expo, which I really loved for a couple E3s ago. Yeah, that's kind of like, you're saying they're situated under the Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends?
Yes, yeah.
Part?
Yep.
That's weird.
It is. It is really weird. And so, like, another one that came out that like stood out to me was Dambuster Studios, who just recently put out Dead Island 2.
Gotcha. They sounded familiar, but I couldn't pinpoint what they worked on.
Yeah, and so really weird how this is named and like why it's like why is it just have and Friends at the end of it? Like I I don't know. And then also, like for the other one, there's Coffee Stain and Friends, which Coffee Stain and Friends is described as a diverse gaming entity with dual focus on indie and single and double A premium. Premium and free-to-play games for PC, console, and mobile with a high degree of recurring revenues. That's a Ubisoft-ass sentence right there. But essentially, Coffee Stain has Ghost Ship, Tarsier, Tuxedo Labs. This one really fucking caught me off guard. THQ Nordic, and Amplifier Game Invest. The IPs that they have under this, you might have heard one or two: Goat Simulator, Deep Rock Galactic, Satisfactory, Wreckfest, Teardown, and Valheim, as well as obviously many others. And the main one, like the Asmode. Sorry, did I say Asmondi earlier? I meant Asmode. It's ASMODEE, and that's just described as a global leading tabletop games publisher and distributor with an extensive studio network and IP catalog. So that one's not as like big, kind of relevant to kind of gaming as you will, but. Man, what I mean, clearly this has to be some sort of like move for like, oh shit, we like the company's too big and we have to diversify or whatever, like split up our, I have to imagine that's what's motivating this.
Yeah, I feel like, for every week that we get, articles and headlines about, layoffs hitting various companies, I feel like we're also just going to be met with something with Embracer trying to cut costs and recoup this giant deal that they fell through. Like,
yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Nick, you can feel free to give me more details if I miss it. But from my understanding, Embracer Group went on this like huge shopping spree where they just bought up everything that they could find, anything that was loose. Obviously, they've secured the likes of Tomb Raider and Lord of the Rings and Dead Island and et cetera, and this was all kind of based on the fact that they were getting this large sum of money from like this Saudi Arabian like investor, and then last second that investor kind of fell through. That investment fell through, and so they didn't get all that money didn't appear, and so they had to all of a sudden be like, oh shit, we spent a lot of money acquiring all this stuff, so we got to lay off a bunch of people, and it was a cause of a lot of controversy in terms of like I think some games were canceled, things were moved around, and ultimately I think it kind of all led to this. But even now, I mean, I'm curious to see how this kind of goes forward.
Yeah, I don't think that they're done. Like I said, I think we're still going to be hearing about even these companies having, issues with retention and all of that. Like, yeah, it's a sticky situation, and I think it's a perfect case study going forward for why, these acquisitions should be looked at with more scrutiny, because some of these studios that they already went through and closed down, I mean, these were, historic kind of studios. The reformed Free Radical Design that was working on Time Splitters, they have many games in their back catalog, and they were like, fairly well-known developers and stuff, and it's just like axed and all this other stuff. So yeah, it sucks, and it's certainly interesting to see this split now also, but we'll see if that maybe if they're not going by Embracer anymore, maybe it's a move to try to get that name just kind of washed away. I don't know.
Like, look, how many? Yeah, I mean, but how many people? Will this actively like? Who's actually going to be okay? Like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. The name is Middle-earth Enterprises and Friends. That sounds totally family friendly.
that reeks to me of a bunch of worried executives being like, oh my god, what do we call it? And Friends, it's good.
They initially came up with Middle-earth Enterprises, which honestly sounds pretty dope. And then they just add and Friends like it's a PBS show at the end of it, as if that's going to fix it. And you know what? I bet just like PBS, they'd probably be willing to take donations from viewers like you. But Austin in the chat says, you summoned me. I can't believe I accidentally said his name and now he's here. And no, Nick, do you have any questions for Austin?
Austin, I started Wonderlands. Is it going to be a good idea to continue, or should I stop while I'm
There
ahead?
you go. And I have a feeling his answer is going to be yes, play them all. But anyway, with that said, the last item that we have on our report before we get to the main topic, an hour into the podcast, as always, is Bethesda has confirmed that over 1 million players have joined Fallout 76 in a single day. Or sorry, is this joined or played? Is it just
It was played.
is it played? Okay. So
But
1 million
still, this
players.
is insane
It
for
is, and
76.
also as a follow up to that stat, they also said that I believe it was I believe it's that same day they had 5 million players across all the Fallout games, just kind of playing Fallout at any given point. Crazy numbers, but if you want to hear us talk more about Fallout, check out the bonus episode, like I said at the start of this one. But awesome. I would love to see the stats kind of going forward of like how this impacts Fallout, as a franchise. I think that this is really the similar story to what we've seen with Cyberpunk 2077, where they drop this show that's really good and then it drives engagement back to the game. Similar thing here with Fallout 76 having this huge fucking resurgence. I mean, this is like I'm on the Fallout 76 subreddit and I see people going like, oh my God, like so many people. And there's this influx of people that are kind of trying to understand the game and get, and also a huge influx of people that are now experiencing the game probably as it should have been when it first came out, right? Like a game that, as much as I appreciate Todd Howard's enthusiasm for the idea, a game that has NPCs, a game that has these different kind of experiences that's not just like an empty land that has occasionally players and then like settlements if you have them. And so it's kind of, I mean, Nick, you're really kind of the person to speak about the growth of this game over the last 5 years. How long has it been?
We're in year 6, 5 full years. So
Yeah.
As I said, insane numbers, because like I'm pretty sure, like I don't follow exactly the numbers of players prior to the TV show. It was certainly in the several thousands. I know that, and it's like in the top 40 of most played on Xbox pretty consistently.
Yeah.
So it's like I knew that it had players, but like a million, like that must be like orders of magnitude what we were playing
it
with.
was like,
so
yeah, and I think like they beat in the last week, I think they've beat their concurrent top Steam player by like three times. Like they beat it and they're like, oh, actually the next day we just beat it again, and then like they just beat it again like 2 days ago, I think.
Yeah, so
it's awesome.
It's really cool. Even as a diehard Fallout fan, as most diehard Fallout fans would tell you, like there's still issues with 76. It's not a perfect game.
Yeah.
It has its issues, but yes, it is definitely in a better place than 5 years ago.
And
which
I
is
actually
what you would hope for.
and I played the game myself 2022. Was it 2 years ago now? I don't know. I did play the game. I want to say it was last year, but actually now I'm really second. I'm guessing myself. Maybe it's 2 years ago. But either way, I did play Fallout 76. I put a good like 15 hours into the game. And the things that I can say confidently, which I don't think I can say as confidently anymore, is that like the community's great. Nowadays with when you because you have to understand, like it is the community is great for a game that a lot of people didn't like. So the people that are playing it are people that are like, yeah, I really fuck with this game and I really like Fallout. So for me, when I was playing, right, like I for the new player experience, I think Nick, you kind of were there for the first time. I think I played, just kind of like guiding me through. Austin also was there, kind of joining me on that adventure. But then I played a lot kind of by myself, and I would find these random players that were like so much higher level than me that would just come by and be like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, you're doing that mission? Yeah, sure, I'll walk with you. And they just start helping me. And like I played for like hour, 2 hours with people that I just didn't. I just met in the game, and they just help out. This dude gave me like a 50 stim packs, and he's like, yeah, dude, have a good one.
Mhm.
I did see some whisperings on the subreddit of some griefing and stuff like that. Now that that obviously the player base is so much larger, but
Mhm.
for the most part, man, it is a really good. It's not really good, but it's good at its current state. It's really good if you're a Fallout fan because it's just another excuse to play some more Fallout. And I know like people like Joey and Chad have previously came on streams and said that like they've been burnt on Fallout 76 just from that opening, like just from how it launched, and I can totally understand that as well. But if you're someone who's just kind of willing to give it a go, I'd say now's a pretty good time as any to hop into it, and you can actually, like I said, win a copy of the game for yourself to play by just leaving a rating for the show on Spotify and go check out our Twitter.
Yeah, real quick, just to, bolt on a tiny little bit on the end there. It is a really good time to join in on 76 right now because they are currently on PC in the public test server. They're testing the next big update for the game. And this is, from early impressions from people playing it, this seems to be like it's going to be like an actual, like, a good update. Not
Damn.
to say
Okay.
that the other
Sure. Sure. Sure.
updates aren't good, but this is going to be the first time that the base game's map is getting expanded with like new locations
Oh wow.
and, new enemies. There's a new boss level fight that's going to be added into the game. So it sounds like there's going to be some really cool stuff, even some stuff that may or may not be tying into some topics that were touched on in the TV show. So it sounds like it's going to be some really cool stuff.
Damn. That's fair. To go back to your question that you asked, Austin, he says, if you like Borderlands style of storytelling, 100% easy platinum with a great cast of voice actors, and it has a fun story. But here's the thing,
Nice.
Austin, back in 2022, April of 2022, holy shit, April 21st, 2022, so almost to the date, 2 years ago, Austin actually reviewed Tiny Tina's Wonderlands for the website, and he gave it an 8 out of 10, said it was great. The game is an absolute purchase for any Borderlands fan. It is the perfect game to introduce potential new fans to the franchise while exposing them to the fun and playful type of gameplay and dialogue that is consistent throughout all Borderlands games. Truthfully, the only real negative that I have about the game is that the story is too short and the post-game content is too repetitive to keep an average gamer invested until DLC is released. So there you go. That was Austin's review for Tiny Tina's Wonderland.
Gotcha. So I'm going to play through the credits.
Yep. Now, Nick, this is a tough topic for me to talk about because, ladies and gentlemen, the main topic of the show is Ubisoft and why seemingly everyone hates them. Now, I don't quote myself in these too much, unless I'm like referring back to a review that I'd done in the past. But I will quote myself to start this topic because I actually don't think there's a better way to start it. And Nick knows this because he's the reason why I remember this. Essentially, I don't even know if we were streaming or we were just kind of hanging out on Discord watching some event. And I said, man, I love Ubisoft, but they make it so easy not to. And that sums up, and that was the same reaction Nick gave the first time I said it. And that pretty much sums up everything we're about to say. And originally, like the concept for this, we've had a lot of ideas for what to talk about for the podcast. And I always knew that I was going to talk about Ubisoft. And initially, my conversation was actually very focused on Assassin's Creed. And the title for that, kind of peek behind the curtain, I guess, but the title was originally going to be, should Ubisoft retire the Assassin's Creed franchise? Now, that I did. We might touch on that still a little bit here, but this is kind of more of a byproduct of a new video that Civic did that is called Ubisoft Isn't Bad, It's Infuriating. This is not a response to that video, by the way. This is just kind of like, while this is kind of in the conversation, I thought this would be fun to talk about and discuss because I do love Ubisoft. And I also admit, and I have written down quite a few things that are troubling about Ubisoft and, kind of justified for why people kind of maybe aren't so hot on them. But I want to start with the good. So, Nick, first of all, what are your thoughts on Ubisoft overall? Are you a fan? Or you can't be as big a fan as me, but are you a fan of Ubisoft?
Yeah, so I have, as I'm sure that is going to come to light in this conversation, I have very mixed emotions when it comes to Ubisoft. Um, I in the 360 era, let's do a little bit of history here. So
Sure.
that was when, like, I've always been playing games for my entire life, but in the 360 era was when I like really got into it, like to the point of like, this is, my focus in life more or less.
Right.
And it's at that time, when I was getting really into it was around when, Assassin's Creed 2 obviously was coming out and was, at the time, kind of revitalizing these type of, open world games that were still kind of burgeoning. You had your
Right.
your Bethesdas, but you also had, Ubisoft and Rockstar that were like, still trying to like build up this genre that the technology was finally able to like more realistically achieve.
Right.
And around that time was also like Far Cry 3. And Far Cry 3 was, I mean, I'm sure I've played other like licensed Ubisoft games and stuff before, but that was the first one that I played and I remember like distinctly really enjoying. Um, Sort of how I described, being introduced to Fallout. Like I think I saw some gameplay videos of Far Cry 3 and I was like, "Oh, that looks really awesome. Like I want to play that wingsuit."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sign me up. So that was kind of where I was coming at from that. And like I had played a bit of Assassin's Creed, and Assassin's Creed, unfortunately, like I've played 2 and I've played Revelations. And those ones were like, when I was playing them, like I don't think the combat necessarily gripped me enough for me to really like fall in love with it. That was the kind of the thing where I just kind of felt like I was like mashing buttons and wasn't
Yeah.
really like
Yeah. Sure.
getting good feedback on that. But I remember really loving, the historical settings and the parkour mechanics of Assassin's Creed.
Uh huh.
So that was like, those games specifically, I was kind of like, I like parts of it. I don't like other parts of it.
Yeah.
Far Cry, I really enjoyed and, played that. But then I would go on to play like Far Cry 4 and Far Cry 5. And it's like, by the time I got to 5, I'm like, it's not, doesn't have the same love that it once had for me.
Yeah.
And like most of the open world games that I will play, like, this is something that we'll get into, is like, you see probably more so than other game studios that are of a certain like larger size that do multiple games, it really feels like their DNA that they use, it's a very similar template for like every game.
Sure.
Even though things like, this one's, a shooter, this one's a racing game, this one's a action RPG, like the overall genre will change, but the template feels very similar.
Right.
And that was something that kind of turned me off to it. But then for like every game that I play that's like kind of a turn off, then something like, the Crew Motorfest or Rainbow Six Siege, like I'll hop into and I'm like, oh, this is doing some interesting things and this doesn't feel like a Ubisoft game.
Yeah.
And then I'll go and, watch gameplay or like watch a review of Far Cry 6 and it'll be like, yep, it's just another Far Cry. And it's like, okay. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at. Like it's like I don't hate them. There's plenty of games that they put out that I actively enjoy, but then there's also like if you were gonna, put your gun to my head and say pick 10 games to play for the rest of your life, it's
The
like
gun
I
that I
don't know
carry
if,
around all the time. Yes, of course.
exactly. It's like I don't know if Ubisoft would crack that 10 if I'm being
Sure.
honest.
See, and like in all things, there's balance because for me, I would put them on the top, but that's because I think I've had a much more like. Here's the thing, right? I do agree with you. I think that Ubisoft inherently does not make a bingeable. They don't make bingeable games. That and that's the nature of the beast, right? Like that's what we're talking about here. They have a lot of these franchises: Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and obviously like the Division or etc. I don't have to go. They own a lot of IP, and they're none of them are other than maybe Rayman. are like games that you can like fly through, and then pick up the next one and fly through and pick up the next one. You would actively be doing yourself a disservice by doing that. That being said, there's a lot of games for me, like the way I play, these Ubisoft games is usually once a year I'll pick a random Ubisoft game and I'll say I'm going to play this one, and that's the game. Like, and whenever I do that, by the way, like I'm not just saying this as someone who's like looking through rose-tinted glasses, because I certainly think that anyone who likes Ubisoft, the dying breed, are a lot of them are probably looking at I remember Far Cry 3, it meant so much to me, and or I remember the original Assassin's Creed, that meant so much to me. And I agree. For me, actually, I started playing with Far Cry 2. I remember like getting malaria in that game. And I remember the original Assassin's Creed. That was actually the very first game I started making videos on YouTube was the very first Assassin's Creed. I'd put my parents' camcorder on top of a chair, and I'd sit behind it and I'd do commentary. I didn't have a capture card, so I literally did screen gameplay capture. And so it's kind of like baked into that kind of narrative for me. But also in recent years, right, I've played, you've mentioned it, I played a lot of the Crew Motor Fest. It's probably one of my most played games last year. And I had a really good time with it. It was my go-to podcast game. I just put it on whenever I'm like, I don't know what to do. Play some Crew Motor Fest. And I really liked Riders Republic. I thought that, and this is something that Ray Sivak actually says in his video, and I have to echo the sentiment. It is some of the most like the best sense of speed I've ever felt in a video game is racing downhill on a bicycle in that game, because you're just like zipping past these tree lines and these narrow, like there's some of them, like the tracks have like blockades that kind of make you swerve in one way or another, and it just feels so awesome. And Far Cry 6, I also played, and you know what? I liked it. All right, I'll say it with my chest. I reviewed it for the website. You can head on over to respawnstation.com and read my thoughts on it. And I say that as someone who's not getting any more game codes from Ubisoft after this one, I guess. But so I made it count while it lasted. But yeah, like I've played a lot of Ubisoft games, that have come out recently. It's not just old games. And actually, I only just earlier this year in January finished Far Cry 3 like all the way through for the first time. So with that all said, I do really love Ubisoft, and there's a few reasons why I like Ubisoft. First of all, they take risks. They do some stupid ass ideas, but like they're ideas that are like no one else is really kind of willing to put a lot of money behind. Like if you think about it, like pound for pound, the original Assassin's Creed was such a shot in the dark. It's really it is a year where essentially what battle royales are to us in this current time in 2024. That's what first-person shooters were back when Assassin's Creed 1 came out. It was like everything was just a first-person shooter, and it was either like a high-budget first-person shooter that was like a console exclusive, or it was like a throwaway shovelware first-person shooter, or somewhere in between. Duke Nukem Forever, maybe. It was probably in development at that time. But nevertheless, they take these crazy risks to be like, hey, let's make this, what was supposed to be a Prince of Persia game. Let's make this a weird open world game where there's present, but then also past, and then there's parkour, and there's like all these like listening mechanics and kind of general open world stuff that for me, I hadn't seen that stuff in that way when I first played that game. And obviously it was a huge hit, and then they released Assassin's Creed 2, which was even bigger, and then I think they pretty much, I don't know if they necessarily kept growing every iteration, because I don't know if Revelations was as huge, or Brotherhood. I don't know if they like both sold as highly, but I know Assassin's Creed 4 also, like Assassin's Creed 4, last I know, it sold like 30 something million copies, which is crazy numbers. And that all kind of branched off from them giving the original Assassin's Creed team the chance to try something new and go for it. And also, you get these kind of, obviously they're making these big AAA games, but you also have Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown that came out earlier this year. There's Immortals: Phoenix Rising, which came out like 2-3 years ago, which was like a really kind of different title from them. You also get something like Watch Dogs, which is a big AAA game, and granted, maybe didn't quite live up to the expectations from that E3 trailer, but I think that like Watch Dogs yes, very, very infamously. But I think it's a case of the like the iteration of it was better. Like I thought Watch Dogs 2 was a much more kind of polished and to kind of the standard that it was advertised to be type of game. So that's an easy one. Do you? Well, before I go through, do you have any places you'd give a Ubisoft merit for?
Yeah, like, while I may have my, reservations about it being a very kind of template design for a lot of their open world outings, it's, a fairly decent template to follow. I mean, obviously, if it wasn't working, the sales would reflect that. And
yeah,
I also think that, you were starting to touch on it a little bit, but with things like Immortals: Phoenix Rising and with Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, I think, these ideas
or
and
Mario and
concepts
Rabbids
that we're talking about, yeah, Mario Rabbids, these aren't these opinions, I guess, that we're discussing that people have about Ubisoft. These aren't exactly new. These are opinions that have, been cultivated over years of time.
Yeah.
And I think these newer games that they're coming out with are like kind of starting to be like, addressing some of those concerns. Like I think Lost Crown is a great example of something that reviewed pretty well and is barely different from their normal and traditional output.
Yeah.
It's, it's smaller in scale, obviously, but I think if these are the types of games that are, signposting the future, I think that they are probably aware of these criticisms and are like, it shows me that they're actively trying to, kind of change some of these,
well, Nick,
things that maybe they were more, felt that they had to hold on to, put out a game.
I will say I did some research for this episode, kind of going into it, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, buddy, but you're gonna have a real shock going up later in this episode. But no, just keep going though. So like another thing that like not even games that we're talking about that are like cool concepts, but like the discovery mode in Assassin's Creed, which essentially or discovery tours I think is what called in Assassin's Creed, essentially for the Odyssey and there's another one, Odyssey and
was it in Valhalla or Origins?
Origins, that's the one it was called. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, sorry, goddammit, Origins and Odyssey, they have like essentially discovery tours where you can turn off the combat essentially, and you go into an educational tour of these areas, these historical areas that they recreated painstakingly, that you can explore just to understand the history and kind of the culture of where it is, which I think is like really fucking cool, because it's an interesting way to like I would have never thought that would like when I played Assassin's Creed 1 that would be a possibility for this franchise, but whoever had that idea like it's awesome and I think it totally works for me. Ultimately it comes down to, and you had said like the repetitive nature, right, of these games and their open world kind of format that they use. For me, I kind of would say that it's like comfort food, and as in, I go back to it, and I like when I picked up Far Cry 6, like when I started playing Far Cry 6, I hadn't played a Far Cry for probably 2 years before that, but as soon as I picked it up, I was like, wow, this is it, I'm in. Like and I had a great time. I thought the map was really not like I really again, I'm not gonna go over all what I thought about Far Cry 6. You can read my review on it, but I had a really good time with it, like from start to finish. And actually, I plan on playing that game again with co-op because I think that it would be like just like a much better experience, even more than what I had initially. So yeah, for me, it's just kind of like going back to something that I know works. It's like I understand it through and through. But again, that kind of goes to what I was saying about how it's not bingeable. It's not like I guarantee you that by the time that you get to the end of one Assassin's Creed or one Far Cry game, you will be like, I'm good. I'm satisfied with, like, I'm full with this. I don't need to go to another outpost or a tower or whatever to synchronize. And I think that's kind of the nature of how those games are meant to be played and how they're satisfying, which then transitions me to maybe why Ubisoft is kind of justified to get some of that criticism. And that includes yearly releases. This was something that I've talked about to death even before I started writing about video games, and that is that yearly releases are not good. They're fucking awful for 99%. We're not talking about Call of Duty because there are 4, 5, 6, 7 Call of Duty studios now at this point, and they're also making so much money that they can fund that operation, that's just the nature of that beast, to use that saying again. But for Assassin's Creed, they at one point switched to be we're going to get a new Assassin's Creed all the time, every year. And it totally, it's, to anyone who's a fan, right? You're going to be I'm going to pick up this game every year, but it's not even the fact that it's the same game, because it's not. There's some story differences, etc. I'd argue that a Call of Duty is different. This it is more similar to the one that came out before it than an Assassin's Creed is, per se. Because the general experience, the scenario, and everything's kind of different. And but that being said, it's still not meant to be a yearly release, because ultimately you need that time to polish and reiterate, etc., etc. But
when you get the yearly releases, it's fine up to a certain point, but then even something like Call of Duty, when not to bring up this old meme, but when Fish AI is your bullet point when you're showing off a game, it's at a certain point, it's the iterations are probably going to be, not as gameplay intensive.
Sure.
Like you said, it's comfort food. You know what you're going to get with a yearly release, and that's going to start taking away from the surprise.
And I would kind of compare it to Apple, right? And Apple is they do the same shit where it's they'll go on a stage. It's this fucking gorgeously shot presentation, and they're yes, our new iPhone comes in a slightly different shade of black. You're welcome. and look, I have an iPhone. I'm not trying. I get it, but also the difference there, and the key distinction there is that just like what I'm saying about these games, you would have to be a crazy enthusiast to buy a new iPhone every year. The newest iPhone isn't it's meant to be that every you leapfrog after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whenever your phone's getting old, you then buy the newest iPhone, and by then you will have gone through 4 or 5 generations of iterations and progress. So you get something that's oh, this is fucking sick. You're not getting the same thing with a Ubisoft game, because they don't have the time to develop those, because game development, as it might be a shock to some people, takes a lot of fucking time. And it's one thing to be able to say, hey, we have this format of these towers that you explore, or whatever, these outposts that you go to liberate, these tried and tested things that are kind of essential to the experience, if you will. But also, you have to have developer time to find new things, find new mechanics. And that stuff isn't just being what I think would be cool, I don't know, I can't think of anything that would be cool, apparently. Polar bears in the map, and you can summon a polar bear. I don't know, I'm just making that up. But it's not just an idea of, oh, polar bears are cool. What if you can summon a polar bear? You then have to go through and test and retest and implement and test all over and over again, which is part of the reasons, by the way, why QA is so important in video games. But I digress. And like, if you don't give developers that time, they're not going to be able to make anything that's any different from what they did before, just, kind of reskinned and kind of applied to a different format. You know what I mean? And like I said, I don't mind that as much as someone who kind of goes to those games every, once a year and kind of really commits my time to it, and then it moves on from it. But it's hard to not. But it's hard to ignore, those aspects.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where I come at it from, where it's like, I don't play every game with the assumption that what I'm going to be playing is going to be, a 10 out of 10, the best game I've ever played, a real holy experience, right?
Right.
I'm not going into every game like that. However, with certain games, it's it's not unrealistic for people to want that, or want the creatives to desire that for the game that they're putting all of their time and effort and money into. So it gets to be to the point like you're making, where it's there's an audience for it, and there's not anything bad with it per se, but it's just kind of when you are so attached to those kind of things, it's hard to remove yourself and be like, I know this could be better. Here's the ways it could be better, and then have it be kind of frustrating, where it's like, okay, why are we, why are we still following this path? To their credit, when they announced that Assassin's Creed wasn't going to be yearly and they were going to take a gap year, I think most people were pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
They were
definitely.
Finally, we're actually probably going to get something a bit different this time.
And now, look, I like to approach these conversations as kind of level-headedly as possible. And I have to say that some of the criticism that has been leveled at Ubisoft is a little ridiculous, because it's almost like they're in a lose-lose situation. You can't get a fucking break. And I can kind of feel for that in terms of I see so many people shitting on these new Assassin's Creed games, and all these they're so much, they're big and they're RPGs, etc., etc. And then I also see people that are Assassin's Creed is the same, they never change. And it's you can't have it both ways. Either Assassin's Creed changed drastically from Syndicate to Origins, I believe that's the order of the games, or it didn't. But by kind of the comparison, they really kind of went in a different direction with the last three games. And while I don't think it definitely worked for everyone, it is a change. To their credit, it is a departure from the traditional format of an Assassin's Creed game. And I know people that are really love Valhalla or Odyssey. I know people who really think that it is the best game in the Assassin's Creed franchise. And so you have to understand that population exists as well. It's just that there's probably a vocal minority that just speaks so loudly to shit on everything that Ubisoft does that it's kind of hard to ignore that. But that being said, going back to, again, there's always balance. There's a lot of things that they do that kind of deserve the eye rolls that they kind of get pretty frequently. One thing that is kind of topical is that I think that Ubisoft kind of milks their IPs. Whatever IP they have, they're milking that shit till it's dry. And obviously a big example for me is Tom Clancy. I think they've just kind of thrown Tom Clancy on top of things just to see what happens. A game that we played, that you reviewed even, comes to mind. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction, I think, what it's called?
Yeah.
A game that I think you and I both agree, we probably look at a little bit differently now. We're kind of an arm's distance apart. As it came out, it was a kind of a different experience. We all kind of played it together, and we didn't hate it. But then kind of looking at it after some time had passed, and you look at it from a distance, you're like, yeah, but like that game didn't have a soul. Like it was like the most devoid, soulless experience that I had played that year, from what I remember. And that's a similar thing of we have this IP. Let's just see what the fuck we can do with it. And then it ends up being things that are maybe not like are not developed by like a develop or not fueled by a developer's like love for an IP or a soul, like, or a project. And it's just like, oh, I have to work on this game that's that maybe we can hit a release window or whatever.
Yeah, you can totally see it's especially with that game where it's like it was probably a very different game when they were prototyping it, and then in swoops Tom Clancy.
Yeah.
Get these Rainbow Six operators in here to, this is your world now. Yeah, that's funny that you bring up that game because you phrased it perfectly fine. The word that I had in my mind rather than soulless was just it didn't really leave an impact all these years removed.
Right.
Like I remember when we were playing it, like I was like having like a decent time with it. Like I was like the mechanics are pretty solid, and like, extraction shooters were still like kind of new. Like they weren't the first one, but they it was not like as, there weren't as many options in that specific kind of genre and niche. But then like, you bring it up, like you mentioned it here, and it's like I can honestly say, like, I don't think I've thought about that game since I played it. Like it really didn't leave much of an impact on me.
And you said, like, about how extraction shooters were kind of a thing at that point, and it was kind of in the middle of that whole thing. And I really think that Ubisoft is they like to chase some trends. With Hyperscape, they thought they could do a battle royale, and so they put that out. With again with the Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction, they would try to get they make an extraction shooter, and that was more or less dead on arrival. I don't really see anyone talking about that, and we reviewed that game. And there's another one recently that I'm blanking on now, but there's these games that are like, I think Roller Champions, I think they just kind of started and then they canceled immediately. And now they're working on X Defiant, which, by the way, I did play the open server test this past weekend. Had a fun time with it. I'm not going to say much more than that because it's not really relevant, but it's fine. Mm-hmm. But they like to kind of see where what's happening and then like capitalize on it the best they can. The big thing that they tried to do like 3 years ago was NFTs. Luckily, thank God, they fucking didn't span out very well. But I could easily see, and that's what's fucked up. I could easily see a reality where there's like a next Assassin's Creed or Valhalla even just launch with like Viking NFTs, like, oh, your helmet is an NFT or your shield is an NFT, whatever, something stupid like that. But even then, if we're talking about, Valhalla, microtransactions, another thing that's kind of a big contention point for fans about Ubisoft games. Valhalla actually ended up becoming the first game in the franchise to hit $1 billion gross, in sales. Or not, I shouldn't say sales. I should say gross, I think, because a lot of that is from the microtransactions. And look, we've talked about microtransactions in the past already. I don't think that they're as huge of a problem, but they're clearly baked into some of these games, from Ubisoft, because they are that kind of the new income source, and it's similar thing with Call of Duty of like the games sales wise make a certain hefty number, and then now microtransactions have become this thing where you can kind of just sprinkle them on and then encourage players to get to pay for things that they would probably otherwise not want, or maybe you've could have gotten for free. If I remember correctly, and Nick, you can feel free to fact check me on this, but I'm pretty sure, I think Assassin's Creed Odyssey launched with, or not launched with, but it had a essentially a microtransaction thing that you could buy that gave you XP. Like you got bonus XP, I believe, or like it was like a XP multiplier of some sort through microtransactions, which is like ridiculous to even say.
Yeah, it looks like there were like XP boosts and stuff for that one.
Yeah. And which is ridiculous to say. And when we're kind of laying all of this stuff out, one by one, you can kind of start to get an idea, right? You get this picture, and if the picture isn't clear enough for you, I think it ultimately says, management sucks. Management does not understand how the fucking business works. They don't understand what the fucking players want, and that's ultimately the thing that is so frustrating about it. And that's the thing that in my research for this episode I've come across, and it really kind of drove that point home for me. Because as you were saying, about how like they know that some of their games haven't been as huge as they wanted to, or have maybe didn't meet sales expectations, and that's certainly still the case. I mean, Ubisoft is notorious for games that come out and then like 1 month later they're like 50% off. But even more than that, I believe it was earlier this year. In kind of probably, I think it was like a sales call or something like that for about Ubisoft. Yves Guillemot. It's a French name, I think. I can't pronounce that. But Yves essentially said we know we've been maybe dropped the ball a little bit, but like we're picking it back up soon, right? Like, I mean, that's essentially what that's not a direct quote, by the way. Don't quote me, but that's the gist of it. It was him saying like, some of our games maybe didn't perform quite as well, but I think our upcoming games with obviously Star Wars Outlaws and having just released Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Maybe that'll change kind of going forward. And also X-Defiant coming out, being a free-to-play title that will probably have microtransactions baked into it as well. That was a kind of general statement. But then, there was this quote from, I think, last year where an internal email that went out to Ubisoft employees got leaked. And essentially pretty much said it was from Yves. How do you say the name?
I think it's Eve.
Okay, so it was pretty much Eve saying to the developers, hey, the ball is in your court. It is up to you to deliver the games on time, on schedule, etc. What the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Love hearing that, right?
Who are you saying this to? I'm not even going to get into the story that I think Jason Schreier broke 2 years ago about the toxic workplace at Ubisoft, because like that's just like shit icing on this shit cake that we're talking about here, and it's not even we're not even going to touch that right now. But despite all of that, right, you have management that does not understand. Like, they're essentially working for the bottom line, right, and that's so stupid, and it obviously sucks. If you look at the Ubisoft stock price, they peaked in 2018 at $24, it seems. They currently sit at $4.58, $4.50 from 24 in 2018. And they peaked again, by the way, in 2021, like during COVID, like they hit 20, but still. There are $4.50 right now, just months after the release of the Lost Crown and Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, and with the story trailer for Star Wars having just released. That's where they sit, and that is the bottom line that they're trying to fucking recover, however they can, right? And they, by the way, 2018, I was curious about like. like why they peaked that year. There's actually like an old press release I found from the Ubisoft that was published in August of 2018, where they're like, "Oh, hey, in just a couple of weeks we'll have Gamescom, and people can come to the show and get hands-on with upcoming Ubisoft games." And these are the upcoming Ubisoft games that they're talking about: Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Trials Rising, Tom Clancy's The Division 2, Anno 1800, Starlink Battle for Atlas, and Nick, can you guess what the other game is? Spoiler alert, it did not come out in 2018.
Oh, Skull and Bones.
It is Skull and Bones.
Yeah.
Oh, those lucky Gamescom people in 2018 got to line up and play Skull and Bones a whole, 6 years before it released. Those lucky bastards. And hello, by the way, to everybody in chat. We're in the middle of a this very intense conversation, so I haven't been checking chat all the time. But so it's these. That's ultimately what I think it comes down to, for kind of going through everything and analyzing my own feelings toward Ubisoft, but also just kind of the general public idea of Ubisoft and their track record for what they've done in the past, even now, right? And like Nick, I'm not trying to call you out, dude, but you were talking about earlier about how like they've made this kind of with Lost Crown, and they've kind of maybe turned a new page, but also they released the story trailer for Star Wars Outlaws, and then they dropped like the super uber deluxe day one pack, all these stupid additions of the game that, first of all, terrible trend in the industry to say, hey, pay extra for the game and then you'll get the game early for like 2 days, like whatever. But then also you have like missions that are apparently like they're not, like they have these Jabba the Hutt missions that are like exclusive to like I think pre-order bonus or something, and they clarified that those missions aren't the only time you'll see Jabba the Hutt. But still, why are you locking down missions for pre-orders? I mean, it was bad already when PlayStation was like, has all these PlayStation exclusive missions, which Assassin's Creed did for a while too. But like, just pre-ordering and adding bonus missions, really, are we there? I mean,
yeah, it's kind of a pain when you see all that stuff. It really, it never pans out well for anybody that advertises those kind of things. And like I've seen this sentiment be made like on other areas of the internet, and it's like, when they're offering it as a pre-order bonus, that it can't be like amazing, otherwise people would be up in
the main
arms
game
about like like why isn't this paid, why isn't this in the main game, like you just said. And then like it also, they can't come out and be like, oh, it's just like a whatever mission, because then you don't get anybody to pre-order.
Yeah.
So it's
it makes no sense. And, I think that kind of looking at all of this, right, it brings up the last two things I'll say, the last 2 points I'll make about Ubisoft before we move on to the conversation, because we've been talking for almost an hour about them, apparently, is that it brings up this conversation about like, first of all, if you're playing a game like Assassin's Creed or Far Cry, are you playing for mechanics or are you playing for story? Or like not the story, but like the experience, right? Like, I think that's a big distinguishing factor, because I'm not going into like a Far Cry and being like, I wonder what new, like mechanics that they'll have to play. Like, I know what the mechanics are. It's a first-person shooter. Similar to Assassin's Creed. I'm not saying that like they can't make any iterations or evolutions of it. Obviously, Assassin's Creed, like I said, has changed a lot. But that you have to consider like what changes are being made and what do they serve, and also if those changes serve developer purpose or developer intent, or if it's just a high up mandate that they have to follow. Like, is it I have to put this in the game because it completes the experience? Or is it, hey, we can't we don't know what the fuck to do here, and they're breathing, higher ups are breathing down our necks to get this fucking thing done. This is what we do, and there's multiple cases of this. Skull and Bones being just a prime example of a game that has gone through development hell with seemingly like no direction and multiple kind of reworks. Same thing seems to be happening with the Prince of Persia remake, Sands of Time remake. And then a similar thing to a smaller degree happened with Far Cry 6, about how Far Cry 6 was originally intended to be a, this kind of like live service, games as a service product. And then they kind of switched that to becoming a little bit more of just like a single player or maybe with friends, traditional Far Cry experience. And there's nothing wrong with the traditional Far Cry experience, but you're also not giving these developers that work really hard a chance to maybe stretch their wings and see what you can get. And I think this isn't just for Ubisoft. This goes to all developers, because when you give the developers a chance, when you give them the opportunity to play around, have some fun, and just try something new, you get games like Hi-Fi Rush, which are just a breath of fresh air. And also, I remember seeing this story, and I probably should have done this as my research, but I remember seeing sometime long ago about how someone on like the COD 4 was like the opening of COD 4 was originally like supposed to be like a different style, or like something different was supposed to happen. And this one person was like, or maybe it was like a small group of people, but I think it was one person who's like, I think this could work differently if the opening looked like this. And then he essentially had to work overtime and work on his own time to kind of make a proof of concept for what they were thinking about, that then made it into the actual game. And then now, obviously, for COD 4 being a beloved game, you have to have that kind of... you have to have developers that you have to give developers the chance to do that without having to slave over, and lose time with family and friends to do it. That's that's ultimately the bottom line there. Interesting. So in chat we have Sri as a guy in IT industry. Every company or workplace is toxic. From employee perspective, is better to discuss the finished product than in work environment as game enthusiasts. Yeah, but like, no, I get that, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth being complacent over the fact that like, how do I say this? Essentially, just because something is the way it is doesn't mean that it has to be the way it is. Like Nick, I don't know if you remember this, but there's this really famous quote from some video game, I forget, but it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting things to change. And that's similar, same thing with games, and same thing with how we talk about the game development space. We can't just expect that we can't just do the same things over and over again and expect toxic workplaces to get to improve or get better without talking about it. But anyway, the last point about Ubisoft that I wanted to make is kind of goes back to the stock prices I was talking about, because I think, and this is not like I'm not like throwing out a wild claim here. I think this is like pretty backed. Like you could probably look for more evidence of this. But I think Ubisoft is on its way out. Not saying that they're going to close the can, close the doors, but I think it's that they're looking for investors, and they're looking for someone to buy them out to take the pressure off their hands, maybe. And I think that's part of the reason, and maybe I want to believe, like, foolishly, that is the reason that they are, driving this, like, trying to mandate things that drive the price of their stock up, because obviously the higher your earnings report, the better you kind of look for an acquisition. The better your year-over-year numbers are, the more you can ask for when you're selling a company. And I think that's kind of what they're going for. The thing about having them try to sell or be sold or whatever is that I that fucking sucks. Ubisoft is one of those studios that while they are huge, they are still relatively independent. Like they're not really kind of working directly under one umbrella or another. And it would suck. Like the industry does not need more consolidation. Like we're not lacking storage space for company names. Like we don't need all like every single development studio to either fall under the Sony or the Microsoft banner. Like we can have middle grounds and kind of, a push and pull. And I think Ubisoft is one of those. It is a cornerstone of the industry for I mean, I know people are going to get mad at me using the word original games, but it is original games that they're making. Big AAA games that normally would not probably get funding. Now, granted, they're getting those funding by doing terrible monetization and chasing trends, and that's the problem. Obviously, along with the other things we're talking about. But you have to understand that, and ultimately, I think it puts us back to where we started. At the end of the day, I really do still love Ubisoft, but they just make it so fucking hard. Or sorry, I should say, they make it so fucking easy to not. They also make it so hard to do that as well.
Right.
But nevertheless, that's all the Ubisoft talk. And now, thankfully, a pretty short segment to finish us off here. It's time for the inbox, my favorite part of the show. By the way, Nick, did you have anything else to say about Ubisoft before I canned it up? I know I dominated that fucking conversation, so.
Yeah, it was, I am to Bethesda as you are to Ubisoft. So I wanted to give you the stage there to, air your laundry with them.
I fucking did. Go ahead.
I didn't have much really to say. You covered a lot of the different aspects that I would have pretty much been, picking and prodding at. I think if there's one thing that extends off of the, evidence of higher ups kind of imposing on it, it's like, and like I'm saying this with a bit of, tongue in cheek attitude, but like, why are their characters the way that they are in their games? It's like many of them have like that the one character, right? The Far Cry's have like the bad guy or whatever.
Yeah.
Many of the games have like the one character that people really latch onto, but then so many of the other ones just like they don't feel like real people. I'm trying not to be like rude when I say that, but like so much
they
of
certainly
it
have
sounds
like this. They have this idea of like, oh, let's make them hipsters, like let's make them like trendy.
I didn't want to say hipster, but yes, it's like all of them
I'll
like
say it.
That, and it's weird.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like Crew Motorfest has that. Watch Dogs has that, and did I mention the fact that they're not making any Watch Dogs, or their rumor they're not going to make any more Watch Dogs? Yeah, I don't know if I did.
I don't think you mentioned it. No.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a rumor that they're kind of sunsetting the Watch Dogs name. Or the franchise. Maybe we'll talk about that more whenever they kind of confirm that that's happening or not, if at all. Probably considering it's Ubisoft, they'll just hold on to the name for 2 decades and not make a game like Splinter Cell. But again, I digress. Time for the inbox. First up, let's take it. Let's make it easy. Let's have a party with a physics-paced party game, Pool Party. Which is coming out on May 16th for PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, and PC. This one honestly just looks kind of fun. It's from developer Lakeview Games, and it's published by Mindscape. It's an arcade game where you can play with up to 4 players and kind of head-to-head physics-based sports and brawl modes. And yeah, you can essentially you can add bots if you want. There's local multiplayer, or you can play solo. This actually, we just got the email earlier today, and it looked really nice. So I knew this was one I had to mention. So yeah, check it out. Pool Party from developer Lakeview Games and publisher Mindscape. Next up, let's continue. Oh, this one is an interesting one. Nick, have you heard of Morbid? the game?
Can't say that I have.
So this was actually it's called, what was it called? It was called something else because it was like Morbid. Hold on, I'll pull it up. It's probably in the email,
The
right?
Lords of Ire?
That is what we're talking about here. But there was another game that came out before. Oh, hold on. Yeah, okay. It's called Morbid: The Seven Acolytes. So this was that game, Morbid: The Seven Acolytes, came out in 2020, which is when, like, right when we were starting. And I remember they asked, like, hey, we have review codes for this coming in, and I played the demo for it, and I was like, wow, that looks fucking cool, but I would be awful at it. It's like a Souls-like, and I'd be awful at it. So I was like, give that code to someone that's probably better served, to play it. And I believe my surprise, or to my surprise, they're making a sequel to Morbid: The Seven Acolytes called Morbid: The Lords of Ire. But here's the thing. Did you look up, by the way, the first game?
No, but I'm seeing the trailer for this new one here.
Okay, yeah. So look at the new one and look at the old one and look how totally different they are. And I kind of like it. It's like, honestly, it's still a Souls-like at its core, but it is a
wow, yeah.
It is very, very different. But this game, the Morbid: The Lords of Ire, it is from Maximum Entertainment and developers still running. And the game is coming out on May 17th. They actually moved up the release date, and it's coming to PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, which will be curious to see, Xbox Series XS, Xbox One, and PC. I don't see a PS4 here, so maybe there's a plan for that or not. But yeah, PS4 is not coming on, but Xbox One is. I did actually play this. This was for Steam Next Fest a few months ago. They had a demo for this out, and I did play it. I thought it was fine. I didn't actually preferred the old isometric kind of Souls-like style that they had, because it felt a little bit different than kind of the traditional Souls-like. This one looks more like a traditional Souls-like. It's 3D game, kind of big environments, open boss areas, but you'd typically expect. Nick, how does this look for you, man? I mean, you're the Souls-like expert here. I've only beaten one Souls-like game, so I'm right behind you. But
Expert. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. I like the enemy designs. That's usually something that I try to pay attention to, because
sure.
From Software, many people would argue, are kind of the kings of the genre, and specifically their monster and creature designs are always a really standout feature. And yeah, these look pretty cool. It does look more traditional, like you mentioned. It is certainly a departure from that first game. So that I'm always intrigued when a game kind of changes it up like that. I mean, another really popular example of that would be Helldivers right now. The first one was kind of like an isometric sort of game, and then we go into this like big third-person shooter for the second one. So it's always intriguing to see when a game will make the jump. It doesn't look bad by any means, though. Yeah, it looks pretty cool.
I'll give it a go. I'll see how it is, but I'll obviously talk about it on the podcast if I do. I'm just not a very good Souls-like player, so it more often than not, I'm pretty I'm aware of what my capabilities are, and I don't want to ask for a code or get a code and then play like an hour of a game and be like, this, I'm terrible at this, I can't put it down, and just not pick it up. So we'll see how it goes. Next up, Team 17 Digital. Obviously, we love Team 17 over here. And are teaming up with Norwegian game developer Sarepta Studio to publish the first-person psychological mystery game called Thalassa: Edge of the Abyss. How do you say that? How would you pronounce that, Nick?
I think you got it. Okay. I would think Thalassa.
It's coming out June 18th. It's launching on Steam, and it's from the same team that made My Child Lebensborn. And again, weird names in the first one that I can't pronounce. But it delves into this new one, Thalassa, Edge of the Abyss, Thalassa, delves Jesus Christ. It's 2 hours and 13 minutes in this podcast, and I've lost the ability to speak. It delves deep into an atmospheric story of self-discovery, intricate relationships, and sea-drenched sorrow. It just looked really cool. I thought I would give it a shout-out. And again, like I said, it's coming out June 18th, 4 days away from my birthday. So that'll be fun.
I do love me some underwater aesthetic, so
that's true. And
I know some people are not as hot on that, but
next up, quick. I'm gonna we're gonna move past this very fast, but there's a game called Minicology. It's out tomorrow. I believe I already shouted it out on the podcast before, but it's literally out April 25th tomorrow, and it is what I would compare. It's a 2D survival sandbox game, and I would probably compare it to Terraria. So if you have any interest in those kind of games, I'd recommend checking it out. It's actually very, very close to Terraria. It's like sci-fi Terraria, and I don't mean that kind of like in a reductive way. It's just kind of like the easiest way for someone to probably understand or picture the game if you are just listening to this. It looked cool, and I don't think I'll get around to playing this one, but it's still cool. It's from a game by Isaac Denner, so check that out. I think we're Scare Ritual. Did you hear about this? SKER Ritual. This
I've heard of the Scare. Like I know that there's other games.
The Maid of Scare is the other one. Yeah. So this is a game in that kind of same universe, but this is a spin-off. Now, this came out April 18th, so I think right after our last episode, which is why I don't think I actually got around to mentioning it. But it is out now on Steam, PS5, and Xbox Series XS. But the interesting thing is, from my understanding, the Maid of Scare was like a horror game, like similar to like Layers of Fear. Scare Ritual is a fast-paced, wave-based first-person shooter. It's like Call of Duty Zombies, pretty much. So if you like Call of Duty Zombies, if you like those round-based kind of game modes, and also like almost like horror elements added to that, I would check it out. It was in PC early access, but now it got its big 1.0 update and has new objectives and weapons and story content and all that stuff. So there you go. That brings us to the end of the inbox. You know what? It's actually funny. So I'm not going to say any names just for the sake of it's not a big deal. I'm just not going to say any names to make it easy. But I've played a game recently, finished it, and is funny because like it was an indie game. That's all I'll say. But it was funny because as soon as I beat it, I was kind of like sitting through the credits, and it's a pretty small team, and I was like, oh shit, I recognize the names of these credits. Like I emailed that person a bunch of times about something, or one person we even interviewed. You have to go to Respawn Station to figure out who that is. It's pretty easy to sniff out who I'm talking about, but I'm gonna keep the mystery alive. With that said, Nick, got anything else to say about Ubisoft or any of the inbox games or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Nah. I think we're pretty much good to go here. You mentioned the Call of Duty Zombies at the end, and the only thing I could think of is how much Call of Duty Zombies I played in high school that I've basically burnt myself out on that.
For life, yeah.
Anytime anybody asks me, hey, you want to play zombies? I'm like, no, I'm pretty good. So I don't know. Nothing against that Scare game, but that was all that I was really thinking about there. But yeah, I think it was another good conversation today, Sri. I think we tackled a lot. We had a lot of different. This one, I think in particular, because I mean, you and I agree on a lot of stuff. I feel like, but Ubisoft, I definitely think we had some push and pull.
Sure, right, yeah.
There, so
yeah, and that was the big thing. I wanted to make sure we weren't just like I don't. It's no fun if we're just coming out here and being like this fucking sucks. You need to have at least some sort of balance to the experience and understand it. So that's why I really as someone who loved Ubisoft, I wanted to see why people didn't like Ubisoft, but also understand both sides of it. So if someone who does hate Ubisoft is watching this, they kind of understand the other side of the coin as well a little bit. I missed some chats. What did Joey, you missed an hour and a half talk about Ubisoft, so you probably have to go back for that if you missed it. Sri, one of the first person to make IT company in India, Infosys founder Narayan Murthy said IT employees should work 70 hours a week without expecting overtime. Well, just because you run a big IT company doesn't mean you're not a dumbass. You know what I mean? Human beings aren't just made to be work slaves. There's a reason why we go to history class and learn about that stuff, guys. Don't let's not try to put that on a pedestal. But on that note, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you did, give it a rating, like on YouTube, all that stuff. Yeah, I'm terrible with. After the 2 hours, my outros go out the window. I'm not focused on doing a good outro anymore. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's really the bottom line. And if you did, well, congratulations, because we'll be back next week to do more of it. But until then, people, as always, thanks for watching, and have a good night, a good morning, and a damn good time. Peace.
Goodbye.